Hello, producers and pop stars. My name is TBSkyne, and good lord, an animated music video from Riot Games. Who was expecting that? I don't think anyone saw that coming, except for all the promotion that they did to make sure that nobody could possibly be surprised by it. This is Sleeping Giants by True Damage, which was debuted at Worlds, the performance for the opening ceremony, in a highly impressive stage performance, which a lot of people are calling holographic, using holograms and stuff, except that's not what they did. It wasn't holograms. They used an ancient stage illusion called Pepper's Ghost, but okay, we'll talk about that in a different video. We'll talk about the actual music video in this one. And the first thing that surprised me about the True Damage music video is that it's 2D animated. Well, largely 2D animated. Like, don't make no mistake, a lot of the environments, a lot of the backgrounds, a lot of the stuff, that's 3D animated, all of it, but the characters are traditionally 2D animated, and in a very classical style too, which we'll get into. That surprised me, but that's also kind of a sensible move because it does a lot to set this particular music video apart from the KDA music video, which was very much a 3D production. And that kind of seems to be what Riot have been going for with this music video, is to try and draw a very specific line that this is not just KDA again, but we're trying to do something different here. Like, they're going into hip-hop instead of K-pop. They are using 2D animation instead of 3D animation. They're using a different set of characters. They're using a different aesthetic for the... Like, they're trying to make some contrast to make this a new and different thing they're doing, rather than just trying to recapture the glory of KDA pop stars. Even though I know a lot of people were disappointed that we didn't get another KDA single, but, you know, get over it. This is also very cool. Second thing to recognize is I don't know jack shit about hip-hop, and I don't know very much at all about modern pop music, and I don't know very much about modern music video sensibilities and things like that. So while I suspect that this thing is making tons of references to tropes and ideas and visuals and like things that happen in modern music videos, I don't have the cultural knowledge to particularly parse what's going on there. If you want to know about the references in this video, of which there are like over 100, then I believe the League of Legends Wikia, or the, what's it called, fan something nowadays, has a complete list of all the references that are being made in the video itself. And if you want to know something about how this intersects with hip-hop culture, well, you should ask something who knows a goddamn thing about hip-hop culture, i.e., definitely not me. What I know something about, though, is animation, and so let's talk about it. Because there's some interesting stuff going on here. Here we're looking at the very beginning of the video, and this is the first establishing shot of the world that we're about to enter, that we're getting. And what kind of world is it when you look at it? Because over here we have this domed, almost sort of Italian-style, European-looking classical architectural building that wouldn't look out of place in like Paris or Rome or even someplace in Scandinavia. Would have buildings with like domes that look like this. Right next to this skyscraper-looking thing that has this sort of vaguely pan-Asian aesthetic thing going on, and right next to this, which looks to me for all the world like extremely classical 1940s, 50s, well, probably 1920s, really, American skyscraper architecture. Like this kind of stuff that you'd see out of New York in that particular time period. Sort of the same architectural style as the Empire State Building. Right amid this super high-tech, sci-fi-looking, futuristic city landscape. So what we're getting the impression of immediately once you start to notice the buildings is this is a very, it's a very global visual. It's something you can't really say, oh, this is clearly a reference to a specific city in the world, because what city would have those three kinds of buildings right next to each other like that? So you get this this sense of cosmopolitanism, the citizenship of the world, which ties into the general theme of the video, which is that all these 5 people are coming together from vastly disparate backgrounds in order to form this supergroup and conquer the world of music, which is sort of the background lore of True Damage themselves. So from there, another couple of establishing shots to kind of establish the first few characters that we're going to be dealing with in this music video. And the very first person we see, of course, is Yasuo. And in the very first shot where we see him, let's see if we can find the one of his hands. There. We learn something else interesting about this music video. It's animated on 2s, or at least the 2D parts of it are animated on 2s. So what does that mean? This is something I've mentioned on the channel multiple times before, but basically, you see how I'm flipping back and forth between these 2 frames right here, right? These are just the same 2 frames repeating over and over. Notice how plenty of things in the environment move, but Yasuo stays completely stock still. But if I then advance 1 extra frame, boom, he moves. And then he doesn't. And then he does. And then he doesn't. And then he does. and then he doesn't. So Yasuo is animated on every other frame of the video, which is running at about, well, on YouTube it's probably 30 frames per second, but about 24 frames per second. That's called animating on twos, and this is how Disney used to animate their 2D animated features. Like, this is some very, very labor-intensive. It's not quite as intensive as animating on ones, which almost nobody ever does because that's an insane thing to try and do. But this is how a lot of Disney movies, cinematic features were animated, is they were animated on twos, which gives a lovely, flowy, very fluid sense of movement to the characters, which is one of the great things about the character animation in this particular video. We can see it with Echo as he does his thing. Like, he moves in a very, very fluid way, but he doesn't move so fluidly as to look 3D animated, because 3D animated characters, of course, can move on ones, and often do. That's what gives 3D animation a lot of its particular visual expression, is that it moves on every frame, whereas the 2D animated character, because trying to do, like, because if you animate on ones and you have a piece of video that's moving at 24 frames per second, that means you need to do 24 individual drawings for every second of animation that you want to get out of this thing. And when this thing is like 3 minutes long, so that's 60, 120, 180, like that's 180 times 24 drawings just to get one character animated at, you know, animated on ones, 24 frames per second. If you're also doing everything completely traditionally in the way that they used to, that means, like, if backgrounds need to move, that's 24 frames per second of everything that needs to move in the background. It's 24 frames per second of every single other character that needs to move in the scene at the same time. So, for example, if you had a group shot of multiple characters and you were animating on ones, well, have fun doing 24 drawings per second for every single one in every second of footage that you want, which is why high-quality animation tends to limit itself to being animated on twos, and in anime, you will often see characters, and general limited animation styles, you'll often see characters animated on, like, 4s or 5s or even 6s, like, really very low rates of animation, because, good lord, animation is a very intensive discipline. So, for me, it was very impressive to see these characters were animated on twos in the style that Disney used to, and god, I wish they'd start doing it again, because the world needs it, frankly. So that's lovely. That's lovely and cool. Anyway, turning back to the very first shot here with Yasuo. So he's the first character that we sort of get to see. We get to see his environment first. We get to see who he is and where he lives, as it were, where he works. And Yasuo is sort of literally underground. Like, I don't know that this place that he's in is necessarily underground, but it looks underground-ish, which seems to me to suggest that, like, that's kind of his role, is that he's the underground, he's behind the scenes, he's the producer. Makes sense. Then we have Akali coming down a set of escalators, which is interesting to me because that kind of feels like it's a reference to her having been part of KDA, this massive, enormous, unexpected success for Riot Games. Like, KDA was an absolute banger of a thing and went way farther than Riot had ever expected, and so it seems a little bit like she's coming down an escalator to sort of leave the heights of pop stardom and return to being sort of more on the street level. Like, that, for me, that seems to be the meta communication that's going on with the particular framing of her being in this, like, subway escalator going down the stairs. Anyway, part of the point here is that we're establishing different environments for these characters to be in, and this happens very explicitly here, where we see Senna to start with, her environment, her color scheme. You can see some grays and green and sort of bluish greens hanging out in the corners over here. A lot of browns, some slightly reddish browns, and a little bit of yellow maybe in her scene. Contrast that with Kiana, who hangs out in pink hell. Is extremely, very pink place, and has this very bright, garish color scheme, which contrasts very strongly with Senna's. Like, she's got all these downplayed, muted colors, and then Kiana's like, ba-doom, party time! Which transitions over into Echo, who's got not quite as garish as Kiana, but certainly more bright and colorful than Senna's environment. Like, these greens happening over here, the yellows, the browns of the cityscape, and then Yasuo, who's all, like, completely muted colors, like teal, greenish, very placid, very controlled colors. Like, contrast the color expression of Yasuo's background with Kiana, and, like, you see, okay, very different personalities being expressed here. And then you have Akali, which is with a somewhat more, I wouldn't say natural lighting, because we've got all this neon stuff going on her, but with a somewhat different environmental lighting scheme than everybody else. So you get these establishing shots of everybody sort of doing their thing in their own place, and then Echo kicks the whole thing off with his first verse. And that's appropriate, because Echo kind of seems to be set up as the leader of the group, or at least he's the person who gathers all the group members together, as we shall see later. So he gets to be the one who kicks the song off as well in the music video. Of course, being directed, as it were, or being played in by Yasuo. And here again, like, a little bit of lovely character animation here, because, like, all Yasuo is really doing here is he's pressing some buttons, right? Like, there's kind of not a lot to that. It's not like piano where you can kind of flail your hands around up and down the thing, or even guitar. There isn't like a movement built in. So what the animators do is they kind of have him lean into it like that. So even though we only get what, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 frames of Yasuo doing something, we still get the sense that, okay, he's feeling the music. And that's an important communication to get across in a very short amount of time, is that, okay, he's into this. Like, there's a mood to him. There's an action to him. He's feeling the music. He's engaged with what he's doing. And that's basic character acting, like very basic character acting, but it's important because, especially in a music video like this, we're flipping around all over the place between characters. Like, we didn't get a lot of time. Like, as I frame by frame my way through it, of course, we can spend all the time we want in these establishing shots, but in motion it's just... And then we get we only get that brief moment of Yasuo. It's like, and then he's gone. So it needs to be communicated in that short space of time what Yasuo's mood and disposition is. And that's being done really well by the animator who's handling this. It's like you can see, you get this, like, the shoulders move. You see that? You see how his shoulders move relative to the rest of his body, so you get this sense that he's got this motion flowing through him. Which, again, very short space of time, a hell of a lot of information is communicated. And here we come to, like, I'm not 100% sure the lip flaps in the lip syncing on the verses worked for me completely. Like, there were times when I felt like the mouth movements didn't 100% match up with what I was hearing. But that's also, like, it's motherfucking hard. Like, doing mouth flaps correctly is incredibly fucking difficult. It's really fucking hard to do. Like, because we're animating on 2s, like, you even though sound is still happening in this frame where his mouth can't move, you still have to create a believable set of motions for the mouth to go through in order to communicate at least as many sounds as you can. But because you're animating on 2s and not 1s, you do lose a little bit. And I think maybe that's why the lip flaps didn't 100% work for me. But again, like, that's something that you only kind of notice if you're like me and you're sitting there looking for it, I think. And also if you're really super fucking particular about mouth flaps like I am. Speaking of mouth flaps, let's actually look at the ones that are here, because phonetics in animation, also really hard. The mouth is an incredibly expressive instrument. Like, the number of motions and movements that human beings can make with their lips and their mouth and their tongues, off the fucking charts. Like, I studied linguistics for a little while in university, and just trying to memorize all the different mouth positions that a human being can have in order to produce sound is absolutely mind-boggling. So look at the expressiveness of look at the expressiveness of his face when we see him for the first time. That mouth is like a million miles over to the right of his face, because he's got this cocky little pout thing going on that kind of leads into all the gestures that he's doing. Like, look at that. Look at how they're moving the jaw around as well. In anime, because mouth flaps are really fucking hard, they don't generally bother with them, because they don't have the budget to do it. They don't have the budget to. So that's why in anime you'll often see, like, characters when they move their mouths, it's just open mouth, close mouth, open mouth, close mouth, open mouth, close mouth. Ba 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 ba. Just literally just flapping the lips, really. But here, they're making a genuine effort to actually communicate the gestures of every word he's saying. So you can see they use the little creases on the lips next to his smile. And you can see how they use, like, they deform and change the shape of the lips in order to communicate, like, the motion and the feeling. And you can see he's biting his lip just a little bit here in order to, presumably on the F phrase, moving. So we get moving too fast. And you can see the T here, like, he puts his teeth together for this, and then You can see he opens there, and that's the plosive. That's the T coming out. And again, that stuff demands a lot of reference, a lot of practice, and a lot of time in order to get it right, in order to make it look natural. Because when you attempt lip flaps like this, the human brain knows when you're doing it wrong. Like, we are incredibly well attuned to the ways in which, like, mouths are supposed to move and the ways in which facial expressions are supposed to move when a person is doing something, which is where you can really quickly fall into the uncanny valley. And this doesn't. Like, at no point during this, it doesn't fall into the uncanny valley. He looks like he's speaking naturally. And my little nitpick about, oh, it doesn't always match up with the lip flap is like, yeah, but that's like saying, oh, well, yeah, sure, you did a skydive and climbed Mount Everest, but you had to take a break at one point, so it's not that like, it's that kind of nitpick, right? It's not really a big deal or an especially relevant one. Anyway, look at the camera work in this thing. And also, look at the environment design of where Echo is. Because, you know, like, the thing you see when you just look at the scene going is that Echo is moving around all over the place. He's rotating the camera to follow him all the time. He's controlling the scene, as it were. But the other thing to notice about the environment that Echo is in is that this shit was upside down from the start. Look at that stairway. Like, the railing is on the underside of the stairs, almost going up. This is an MC Escher environment. You can see the arcs on the buildings here. That's the street up there, which is already upside down, and you can see that when Echo moves us around to another perspective again. That again, like, the stairs going in all kinds of different directions. Is he on the wall or is he on the floor? Is the camera tilted? What's going on? We are completely off balance because he's living in an opposite MC Escher world where none of the geography makes any kind of a sense. And that works really well with Echo's particular power set in terms of what he's being shown to be able to do as true damage Echo, where he's not only able to control time, but also seems to be able to control some level of gravity. At least in-game, his avatar has these emotes where it's like running on stairs in the air, which was also shown off and displayed during the Worlds performance, where it seems like part of what Echo is able to do is distort the environment around him, which is appropriate because his whole thing in this whole thing is that he's the cocky genius prodigy kid who's here to teach everybody a lesson about what it means to be the best in the game. So having the whole world distort around him and kind of conform to his personal gravity, that makes sense as an aesthetic choice. Like, the whole world warps to suit what Echo wants all the time. He needs gravity to go, like, perpendicular to the shape of the Earth? Sure, it'll do that. He needs gravity to push him upwards into the sky? Sure, it'll do that. And that's emphasized in his choreography with the camera, where, like, literally the first thing that happens is that Echo turns our world on its head. Right? He turns the world upside down for us, and then he starts to manipulate the camera all the time, is following him. It's always catching up to him a little bit. You can see it happening. Like, he teleports, the camera follows him. Hey, what's up, dude? And then teleports, and it follows him. It teleports, and it follows him. It's always trying to keep up with him. He's always a step ahead of what the camera is trying to do, and he's always controlling it. He's controlling what's happening. Which, again, does a good job of doing the storytelling for the character, and I really do like this snapping the camera to the side. And you see how he leads in and fades out of the action? So here, he slaps the camera from the right across here. So we get this motion going whoop this way. But then when we land, like, the natural position for his hand to be in from here is to get over here on the side of the screen, right? And that's exactly where it is. It's on the side of the screen where you would expect it to be if he had swept the hand all the way across. Except he's standing on the wall now. So in terms of trying to lead the camera into making that turn, almost, like making something that seems like a turn, that's a really clever way to do it, just from a filmmaking perspective. And also, look at the rhythm. Like, especially look at the way he talks, right? Look at the way he moves his jaw, like he pushes it forward. He kind of spits at the world a little bit when he's spitting hot lyrics. As I believe the kids say these days. Like, all that expression and animation in his face. Look at that. Look how much effort has gone into getting those lip flaps to really communicate his, like, sort of brash, confrontational persona. You get the sense of who he is and who he's trying to be. And that's just really well done. And I really love the rhythm of his hands. Look at the rhythm of his hands as he's tapping on his own chest. Did you see that? That little thing. where one of the hands is tapping faster than the other. I love that. Like, rhythm offsets like that are just so fucking cool animation. Look at this. See, tap together, then that one taps twice as the other one comes out, and then that one comes down. So you get this sense of him not, like, of this disjointed rhythm of him tapping the chest. And again, that's such a human move, because humans often do that. Like, we don't necessarily synchronize the movements between left and right side of our bodies perfectly, so we do those little slightly off-kilter, out-of-sync movements like that. And that's such a good observation to make him feel more physical and real, that he's not moving perfectly. Like, that there is that human off-kilterness about him. And I also love just the little details, like how he shifts his foot here. Like, he shifts his foot, and you can see as he leans to the right, yeah? You can see he shifts his foot a little bit in order to lean more on that particular leg. And you can see that as like the weight of the arm comes down, how the leg follows down into it, and the foot rotates a little bit again. Like, those little rotations of the foot just do so much to communicate the positioning of his body, how he's shifting himself around. Like, look at it in motion again. Like, just that little back and forth from, like, zip, and then to the left, and then back to the right. As he's shifting his weight, like, from side to side, as he's feeling the rhythm, you can see, even in the little bits, you can also see it, like, in the way that, like, his whole lower body shifts here. Like, even, they could have gotten away with just letting this leg be completely still, really. But there's so much extra effort put into just the tiniest little details, like the way that, like, the folds on his jacket maintain that consistent sense of being, like, this floofy, big, warm thing that he's wearing. And I really... Look at that gesture again. He moves his hand up to his face, and then... boom! Or burst is what he's saying there. Synapses fire and... burst. And you can see him holding that B for just, like, a couple of frames. For 2 frames, he holds that B. Burst. And then we get that little visual effect to kind of emphasize what he's saying. And here you can kind of see one of the things that animating on 2s, like, creates a little bit of limitation. When you're doing very quick movements like this and then you slow them down, they can look a little bit awkward sometimes. Like, this motion looks a little bit awkward, right? But when you see it in full motion, looks perfectly fine. Like, absolutely nothing was wrong with it. But because this style of animation is sort of, in my opinion at least, it's less well-suited to, like, if you were animating this with more of an anime aesthetic, there would be ways to kind of smooth this motion out that would make it look a little bit more slick and stylish. But it doesn't matter. Like, again, this is me nitpicking someone who climbed to the top of Mount Everest because, oh, hey, you dropped some trash along the way or something. Like, some minor thing that doesn't matter. I do like the motion that Yasuo makes between the frames. You see how we start by cutting into... He cuts into Echo's thing with just 1 frame here. But then look how his hand is moved from one position to the other, and then again, and again, and again, and again, and again, and again. So you can see how he's kind of moving between Echo's frames there. And it's almost like he's the one who's moving the song along to the next part of the verse, which I quite like. Like, that's a lovely little gesture. And again, we have so little time with him, and yet we need to get the feeling that the guy is doing something, like that he's into the music, that he's contributing something to what's going on. And again, it's that little, look at that little sway of the body. Like, he starts here, and then he lets the motion of his arm kind of guide that little sweep to the side there. That's a lovely curve of motion, isn't it? It's like gentle, flowing, like the wind almost. And again, there's just that right there. Like, I have to imagine that they just drew him at a really high resolution and the animator just continued to... No, actually, these are... Okay. So my assumption here was that in order to do this zoom-in shot, they just drew this version of Echo at a really high resolution and just zoomed into that. But no, unless I'm much mistaken, they're zooming in now, as much as they can, but I think... Is it here? I think here they transition into a completely new drawing. They certainly do it here. It's like a completely new rendering of him. It must be, in order to facilitate this zoom into the eye that then becomes our transition, as again, Echo flips the world upside down on us. This is my time, better look in my eyes. And so we do. And he changes the world in front of our very faces. This cut is interesting. Because it works so well, but... I guess it's the continuum of motion between that. Yeah, it's the hand motion, I think, that makes the cut for it. It's cutting on movement, I think. Because you can see he makes the motion of the hand up to the head, and that motion is still there when we flip over to the next angle. It's meant to be disorientating, by the way. It's meant to be kind of messing with your perception. But here's also where you can see that the camera and the environment that he's in is 3D, but Echo isn't 3D animated. You can see how the stairs kind of slide underneath his feet because the stairs are moving on ones. They're moving on every frame, as 3D animation does, but Echo can only move on every other frame. So you can see how, because of the way that they've done the camera motion here, he's a little bit off kilter from what the environment is. Again, you'll never ever notice this when you watch this in full motion. At all. But it's just one of those little fun things to observe when it comes to mixing 2D and 3D. The ways in which a free-floating 3D camera can be kind of hard to follow for 2D animators, and still I love the expression on these lip flaps. And just the face in general. Like, there's a lot of expression that goes into the way that they make sure the light falls across his face. And the way they use those lips. Like, they've made a point of fully delineating his lips, not just with color, but with actual hard lines. And they're using the expressiveness of those lines to... Like, you can see how here, as he goes up into this syllable here, you can see how his lower lip seems to become really thin because he's kind of drawing it into his mouth. In order to do that motion right there. There's a really expressive mouth in this kid. It's really nice. Also, another thing to know is, like, his hair. Look at the little motions, like the little wavy motions it makes as it follows along with how Echo himself is moving. That's also something that's really hard to do because you have to constantly keep in mind what's the inertia, like what's the latest bit of movement inertia that's been imparted to the hair in order to make it, move in a way so that, like, you can really see it here also, like how his hair has that gravity to it. Like, where it's moving believably, it's reacting to how he's moving. Like, so when he does... Right, so here he rises up a little bit, and you can see how the hair kind of flattens a little bit, and then it stands up again. And that's something I really love when it comes to animating characters' hair. That's something that, again, anime generally doesn't bother to do. Anime likes those ridiculous spiky hairstyles because it allows them an excuse to keep the hair as still as possible between frames and not need to animate it. And that's the same reason, like, characters like Son Goku, for example, mostly have black hair, is that means they don't have to animate the individual strands of hair. They can just animate the hair as a mass, which is something that's very useful to them, especially when turning his head. And I'm definitely getting some Spider-Verse vibes, like both from the glitchy animation effects that are associated with Echo, like he uses all this glitching stuff, and the fact that he's voiced by Thutmose, who also did a song on the Spider-Verse album, I believe. And the glitch effects, and like the whole the cityscape that's turned upside down and inverted by gravity, which was something that Spider-Verse also played with a lot. So I think there's definitely some inspiration there. And again, look at that as he lands. He's got his foot out there, right? And then he steps it back. And as he steps it back, you can see his whole upper body. And it's hard to see when stuff, you're looking at it from the side. You can see how his whole weight shifts so believably. Like, this is just really good character animation. Human beings are fucking hard to animate. Like, That's one of the reasons why so many low-budget 3D animation features choose animals instead of humans as their subjects, is because human beings are hard to animate. The human brain is hardwired to see when there is a flaw in how a human being is animated, when there's a flaw in how they're moving, and that's, again, the uncanny valley that you risk when it comes to that kind of thing. And so it's just damn impressive. Like, it's just really well executed. So here we have Kiana literally descending from the shining heavens in a halo, like an angel of music, as you might, if you're Phantom of the Opera fans out there, hello. And she has a very different aesthetic of movement than Echo does. Like with Echo, it's all fast movements, like the hands are flying around and the body is shifting the weight all the time. And he has this confrontational energy to him all the time, like he's preaching almost. And then there's Kiana. Look how she moves by contrast. Languid, kind of slow, sensual almost. Which is also a kind of confidence that's being projected here. Because she's literally above us and looking down at us and we're looking up to her in a very literal way. But it's still projecting a confidence. And oh, look at the head rotation. Look at that subtle little head rotation. Like that. Like when she moves from here. And how she... Like that, it's that little motion from here to there. Oh, that's good. Those little motions can be so hard to keep consistent. I know, this is just the tiniest things that I'm getting obsessed with here, but... From there, that tiny little turn of the head. Again, it's really, when you're not... The 3D animation software isn't here to help you. Like, it doesn't keep a consistent 3D model that is perfectly proportional and on model from all angles. So when you, doing the big moves in animation is actually sometimes a lot easier than doing the small ones. And so for me, when I see something like that little gesture, like of her just, like, you can see how she pushes her chest out, and as she's turning her head a little bit and projecting her voice, I'm like, oh, that's so good. And again, 3D animated environment, 2D animated character right in the middle of it, and God, it works so well. And I love the lighting too. Like, an environment like this, there's no way to not make it garish, right? Like, there's no way to not, okay, that's way too much pink for any human being. But there are ways to frame it. There are ways to balance out the pink. Which here is being done with a soft yellow of, like, the crystal chandelier thing, whatever the heck this is, these decorations. And then the really bright white light of Kiana's ring, as well as the lights inside these arches here, do a lot to balance out that shock pink aesthetic and give it more of a feel. And of course, the ring itself being lit up acts as a literal spotlight on Kiana. It draws your eye. It draws your attention to her. Even though she's very tiny in this very large environment, she's still the absolute center of attention, which is just good composition. And then we have this smoke animation. God, this video is going to be long. Because the smoke animation, unless I'm much mistaken... Yeah, the smoke is animated on ones. See that? The smoke moves at every frame when everything else moves. And that gives... And that is a way of contrasting timings. Like, that's where sometimes animators... Like in anime, for example, when you have a big pivotal fight scene between two important characters, that's when the frame rate gets kicked up a notch. Like, that's when they really do a lot of high frame rate animation in order to sell the importance of that scene. That's why they use all these conservation methods to avoid animating as much as possible during, like, dialogue scenes or establishing shots or times when there doesn't need to be a bunch of animation. They try to save every frame they can in order to put the budget into the scenes that really need it. And the thing you can do when you have, like, this smoke that moves on ones, like, look at that smoothness and poof. Like, it gives the smoke that kind of almost liquid feeling, almost like it's made of water as it, boom, like, brings Senna into the world. Or constitutes her, I suppose. And again, look at the hair movement. Like, the hair is doing so much to sell the feeling of her pose here. Like, just how it kind of settles, and her earring as well. And I do like her first motion as she does a thing. And you can see here, another cost-saving measure. Senna here in the background, in the shadows, who we don't really need to see. Not a lot of detail on her. But then as she steps forward, boom. You can even, I think you can even kind of see how, yeah, more and more of her face gets rendered as she steps more into the light. Again, it's a way to save a little bit of cost, as it were. Like, not necessarily money, but labor time, in order to spend it where it matters, which is here. Here's where it matters. And again, oh my god, look at everything moving. Like, look at that. Look at how they're using the scarf here. As she comes up with her hand, like you can see how the whole scarf almost kind of bounces on her. It kind of flies up in front of her face and then bounces down as she drops her elbow and goes into the awake now. And Senna especially, like, look at all the motion that's in the cloth, like the cloak she's got, like her sleeve that's hanging off her here. Even look at the bracelet around her arm, how that bounces up and then falls down again, and how it kind of just a little spin around her arm. There's so much detail going on here. There's so many things in motion on Senna, like all of her dreadlocks and the oh god. And again, an animator has to keep all of this in their heads. Like, the animator has to keep track in their minds how everything is moving. Like, what's the momentum of this ring as it's coming up right now compared to what's the momentum of the sleeve? What's the momentum of the cape? What's the momentum of the dreadlocks? What's the momentum of her jaw as she's expressing this particular... Look at that little head tilt. Like, as she's kind of looking down a little bit as she goes into the note, but then as she belts it out, you can see how her head tilts back a little bit, and she's kind of screaming to the heavens almost. And that's what's always been so impressive to me about 2D animation, is an animator's ability to keep all of these different momentums, these different movements of the body, like what has which inertia, in their heads smoothly. Like, without even a lot of difficulty. It's desperately impressive to me. It's desperately impressive. And that right there, like when you see her do that little motion, because this is so well done, it looks effortless, right? But take a look at what's actually happening with her body. This leg right here, it's gonna tilt so that it points the other way. So you have to manage the three-dimensional movement of the leg in order to sort of, you can see how the thigh, here it's foreshortened, so it's a very short thigh, it looks like, and then they lengthen it, but they have to lengthen it exactly the right amount to maintain the pivot point on the leg as she shifts her weight to the other side, and the cape, which is billowing in the wind at the same time as it's reacting to Senna's movements. And it's such a simple, smooth little motion that it barely looks like anything when you just kind of scan over it over the course of the video. And then once you start thinking about everything that has to go into making something as simple as that work, I mean, it's mind-blowing. It's animation has always been mind-boggling to me at that point, especially because, like, a lot of animators, it's not like they're sitting there doing physics calculations in their heads. They're doing this stuff on instinct and experience. They're doing this stuff because they have a feeling about, okay, how do we move this? And also because they're looking at a lot of reference. Like, lots of rotoscoping and reference goes into these kinds of things in order to make them work, I'm sure. And that's something that when you see behind the scenes footage from animation studios, some of the best stuff is animators making animation reference for each other, where they're like acting out the scenes that they have to act out in the actual animation. And you can see the kind of hilarious ways that they overact because they want to have something that they can tone down or play up for the animation. It's lovely. Here's a really interesting motion. Like, again, I don't know how to... I'm not sure how to communicate that right there. That motion. Right? So, Senna is she's kind of tilted towards us already as she walks forward, and then as she brings that leg forward, you can see this leg is going to come forward. She's going to drop the entire weight of her torso down. Whoom. And you can see she transitions her weight from being on this leg to being over on the other leg. But look what happens to the torso. Like, look at that motion. That right there. And again, this is the thing I got so fascinated about with Kiana with that little head motion. It's the same thing here, because it's not really a big movement, but it's this subtle rotation of the torso from being kind of tilted forward to being completely tilted forward to going back to being only kind of tilted forward, and to maintain that feeling of... Because you can see it, like you can see how the weight lands, and then there's this follow-up, and then it goes up again, and then it kind of settles into itself, right? There's that little landing here, like when the weight lands, when she lands her weight on the leg, you can see how the whole body kind of settles into that, and then bounces up a little bit, and then it goes in. Like there. That little, she hits the peak of the dip right here, and then that little bounce up, and then the whole body follows up into the next movement. And again, look how the bracelets are bouncing around on her arms. Look at that. Look at that. How she moves into this, and then as she brings her arm up, like, the little ring does a little circuit around her wrist. I love that. And then, like, the bracelet itself gets affected by gravity and falls down. And you can see the ring follows and bounces off the bracelet on her arm as she brings her whole arm down. And again, look how the bracelet is rotating around her wrist as she's moving. That's really fucking hard! And it's such an... Like, nobody's gonna see that! Like, nobody who's watching this casually is gonna is gonna notice that happening. But because that movement is there, it feels like she's moving naturally and fluidly, because there are all those little accentuating details. The way that the cape swishes, the way that the hair follows her motion, the way that, like, that weight is being dropped believably. Oh, it looks so good. And I feel like the thing that distresses me is that this stuff is so easy to overlook. Because that's the whole point. Like, when animation is done right, when it's done really well, you don't notice it. You don't see it at all. Like, it's just, oh no, the characters are just moving. You don't notice that every single frame of them is the product of someone's hard work and intellectual exercise and feedback processes and thinking and, like, feeling what the motion of the shot is supposed to be. And it's like, oh, God, when you start thinking about how much work goes into something that looks so easy, you know, it boggles the mind. Even a shot like this should be easy, right? This should be nothing. This should be not even a thing, because all it is, it's Kiana standing completely stock still as the camera pans up her body. You didn't have to do anything fancy for this. But look at that. They couldn't help themselves. As the camera pans up, the little reflection of light on her neck ring, whatever the hell this thing is. See how it moves? It moves across to indicate, like, a changing in the positioning of the light source relative to the aperture that's receiving it. It's the same thing happens across her glasses, and it's just, that's so extra. And the little sparkles on the ring as you move up past, you can see that there's a labor of love going on here. That these people gave it shit about making this look good. Look at these little flashes of light off the jewelry on her shoes or whatever. Those are hand animated too. And again, you didn't need to add all that detail. You didn't need to add little glimmers and and like the light moving across the collar and whatever. You didn't need to do that. But they did it anyway. And am I wrong, or... Oh, they're doing it on the lips too! Look at that! Look where the light is on her lips there, and look how it moves across the character all the way over to the right of her lips as we pan up. God, this is so fucking extra. I love it. Oh, I love it. I love how extra that is. Because it's so unnecessary, but again, look at it in motion. How it sells that feeling of panning up across her. That you can see the light moving on her a little bit as you do so. Ugh. Extra little motherfuckers. So good. And here again, this looks again so deceptively simple, doesn't it? She's not really doing very much. She's just kind of hanging from it, right? Like she goes from being in this curled position to kind of hanging down with her head. And she kind of, not much happens there, surely, right? Except, no, of course not. Of course, this is incredibly complicated and really weird and difficult and extra. Because she goes from being in this crouched position, we're looking at her from her right side. And as she, at the same time as she's folding her body down, the whole ring is spinning and rotating. So we get like the rotation of her butt, and her legs and her feet at the same time rotating relative to each other, while the artist has to figure out how to unfold her body, how to keep that that half circle motion of her body unfolding consistent with the rotational motion of the ring as it's swinging her around. And you can see one clever little thing they do is you can see how the head goes from here, and then it kind of travels down here, and then it kind of swings over this way as she pulls herself up again a little bit. And you get this lovely arcing motion that kind of follows through the whole movement of her body, which is one of the things I think that anchors the motion of the body, is that you have that little arc of the head to kind of sell, okay, that keeps the spine in one place. This is all so fucking difficult. Like, this is all really fucking hard. And again, and also the other thing that we haven't talked about at all is how they move the light around the character. Look at this. Look how the highlights are shifting across her shoulders as she bends up, and then the highlight on her abdomen. How that shifts around a little bit and kind of accentuates the shape of her ribcage as she's hanging from the ring. Again, it's all just extra as fuck. Oh, that's a good movement, isn't it? Isn't that a smooth movement? You can see it again here. This is how dancers move in real life, of course. And again, the bracelets, mind the bracelets, how they're moving and flying around. Mind the hoop earrings, how their weight is shifting with what she's doing. And how, like, this arm is gonna make a sweeping motion out around this way, right? And then she's accentuating that by bringing the momentum of her arm up here. And then, like, swinging that in front of her head as she brings in the road. And again, look at the shadows moving across her face, like she's shadowing her own face with her arm. As she brings that into that whoop, swooping glasses down on her head. And look at that. Look at that clever little motion. How there. The head gets there first, right? She starts here, and then she swoops her head around quickly, and her body just takes a little moment to follow. They don't move simultaneously. They move at a slightly disjointed timing there. And that, again, it works so well. At the same time as the fucking animator is managing to give her lip flaps. Like, it was impressive enough when Echo was doing it, but now it's like backwards and in heels. Because again, the lip flaps are being managed at the same time as the weight of the earrings, as the movement of the chest, as the movement of the jacket, and the bracelets on her arms. And it's just the amount of work and the amount of effort that goes into this. It deserves to be recognized so much more than it is. And again, look how they're moving the lights around on her glasses as they're doing this also. Because, of course, why not be extra? And here we get a lovely... Like, here we kind of calm down a little bit with all the big sweeping motions, and we just get to see Kiana use her lips. Like, look at all the expression. Like, that little lip curl right there. That little kind of dismissive, like, ain't no going back. Like, there's so much personality in that. Like, you really get the sense of her. Like, the way she's talking is not quiet. It's not laid back. It's not demure. This is someone who's confident and who doesn't mind people hearing every single syllable that's coming out of her face. Because what she's got to say is fucking brilliant. Because she's the best pop star in the whole world. Like, that's the attitude that you get. And again, look at the hoop earrings. Moving like that how they're kind of swinging around and dangling as she's moving her head about. So good. Yeah, they did. Okay. As she opens her mouth and sticks out her tongue to taunt. We're 1 minute and 13 in, and this video is almost an hour long. Yeah, it's gonna be fun. Notice what the hoop earrings do. Yep, they move. Again, they could have just animated the mouth opening and the tongue coming out and maybe the jaw moving down a little bit, but no! They had to go the whole way, where you can see the hoop earrings shift a little bit in response to the movement of her jaw. Her head tilts down a little bit, the ears tilt up a little bit, the hoop earrings move. It's so fucking extra, all of it, and I love it. I love it when artists just go fucking extra, when animators just go all the way out to make it look so easy, and yet it's so fucking hard. And again, this tilting forward of the body, which of course, again, is part of her expression. She's also confrontational and saying, hey, I'm the best in the whole goddamn world and you can't hang with this. That foreshortening, managing the length of the torso, managing to hold the movement in a way that's believable, that's really fucking hard. And I love these expressions. Like, look how expressive she is. Look how much there is going on with her in terms of how she's expressing herself. Like that confidence, the smile, the seductiveness, but also a little bit of that crazy feeling and that little lean back. Like she brings her hands up and that little wiggle. Like, it's such a good little wiggle. Like wiggling her finger across, wiggling her... God, it's just good. It's just well-constructed motion. It's just so well-constructed. And again, always remember, every frame of this, every line, every pixel is a decision that someone made. Someone had to, like, make the decision for all of this to happen. There's nothing about this is automatic in any way, shape, or form. And here we get smear frames, my favorites. Yeah. That's a smear frame. It's supposed to look silly. And here's something else difficult is happening. See, before with like Kiana and Senna, we had this camera movement that was kind of pulled back, right? Like that wasn't really that left us with a lot of the body to look at. But here, Akali is 110% right in your face, which means the animator has to know the position of all her body parts off. Well, not all of them, but every body part that like if her hand is going to be on screen here, they need to know the position of the elbow down there. They need to know the way that the foreshortening is working on the between the shoulder and the hands. And you can see how she's holding the camera basically. Like that's what she's doing. She steals the camera from Kiana and Echo, and then she's holding it. It's basically selfie cam style. And again, here, the hair. This is much more explicitly anime-style hair, but the motion of the hair, the movement aesthetic of the hair is not. Like this, again, you really won't often see anime animating hair the way that they do with Akali, like shifting it around behind her, and I love that. Like, look at that. It's that little line by the nose, like that indicates the tension in the face as she makes this excessive expression. Also, here's another great animation principle: disjointed timing. Both Akali and Echo are animated on twos, but look. Akali moves, Echo moves, Akali moves, Echo moves, Akali moves, Echo moves, Akali moves, Echo moves, Akali moves, Echo moves. And that's something that's really important here, because when you're dealing with a limited frame rate, if everything is moving on the same timing, if everything is moving on the same frame timing, you can get scenes that look kind of flat and disjointed. It can look like everything's kind of moving on rails, like it's being moved by a computer in perfect synchronization, whereas in real life, of course, almost nothing ever moves at exactly the same time as anything else. And so by having that disjointed timing between the emotions, it's something that you kind of can't see when you're just looking at it here, right? But a big part of the feeling of that interaction between the two of them, like where they feel like each of them are moving on their own beat, on their own timing, like Echo is kind of, he's agreeing with her, he's going, yeah, fuck yeah, listen to this cool fucking verse. Part of that happens because of that, like that deliberate offset in the timing between the motions of the characters. If they were moving on exactly the same frames, it would look much more stiff. It would look much more unnatural in a lot of ways. And it's something that, again, when you see it in motion, you might not really notice it very much. but the feeling would be different when you watch it. And it wouldn't be something... Ah, my fucking god, look at that twist. Look at that, look at that. Okay. See? We start out here. Akali's chest is kind of pointing this direction-ish. Like, you can see her collarbone is kind of pointing out in this direction. Now look how, as she leans into Echo, she is also twisting her body a little bit towards him. Look at that. Such a tiny, subtle twist, but it does so much to kind of change the expression of motion. I love this too. Like, that foreshortening on the arm as she makes that gesture. Oh, that's so good. Now you can kind of see it here, because they're dancing together, here they're moving on the same timings. And so the artists are doing something else. Yeah, they're moving on the same and different timings. And that's what gives them that dynamic of dancing together, but not dancing, like, not being sort of completely in lockstep with each other, but doing their own thing, like giving their own expression to the motion. And then there's these shots, which are clever, like, because all the motion in these shots is being made by the flashing advertisements up the wall. They work really well. It's just a cool series of shots. Okay, I'm gonna try and stop obsessing over, because I think we've covered. No, but like, look at that! Look at that, though! Look at that, like, how she twists her head, like, she tilts her head a little bit to look at her nails, and she twists us a little bit more towards us, and how the earrings are moving at the same time, and how she's doing that little gesture, like she's kind of just wiggling her foot a little bit. Like, oh, it's so good! And also Senna's, like, expressiveness on her, like, because she's this, the diva, as it, well, not the diva, but she's the big voice on the song. So here they're doing something like this is what they're simulating here is strobe animation, where you can see the lights turn off, lights turn on, off, on, off, on, and when you synchronize that with like a fan moving like that in real life, you could pull something like this off if you had the exact right timing on the strobe, compared to the fan speed of the thing that's moving. But here comes the best part of the music video, for me anyway, is when we enter that universe of the fan that Yasuo kind of puts in motion. Now, Yasuo doesn't really get much to do in this music video, unfortunately. Like, he's just kind of... Like, that's it. That's kind of his only big motion at all. And it's fine. Like, it's just... Yasuo has always... For me, Yasuo is the weakest of the true damage... And here comes the really fucking good part. Yasuo is the weakest of the true damage character designs because he's just kind of... He doesn't really look like anything. Really? Like, he just looks like a cyber ninja from the future thing. But he doesn't, like, he's supposed to be the producer of the group, but I don't, like, my image of what a producer looks like, and again, I admit I don't know much about pop, but my image of what a producer looks like just, he doesn't look like that. He looks like a fantasy thing. In much more than the other characters who kind of look like they could be pop stars in the real world, though, you know. Look at that. That little kiss there. Poof. And here comes just the good part. Like, here's where they go full expressive. Like, this is just full decorativism and expressivism on one where they really play with the fucking color palettes. Like, here, you can see how Echo comes into existence, right? His head, his arm, his shoulder, the various parts of him. Boom! Then they're rendered in, and then he becomes real. But then as he does that motion, kind of hammers into himself, boom! He abstracts again. He becomes a series of abstractions of motion that can then do that little movement and reconstitute himself. And I just love, because every time, like, see that? how his face becomes, he essentially becomes a little Picasso for a second, or a cubist painting of himself, or an abstract version of himself. And you can see how even with these geometric shapes, they form that smooth shoop that takes him right over there. And like color flashes to sell the sense of an explosion. God, this is so cool. Like, this is, oh my god, the animators just had fun with this shit, didn't they? And still, all the same things that we said before, like this is still, let's see, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. This is still animated on 2s, so all the same principles apply that did before, but now they don't have to play with light. Like, there's no lighting to mess around with, which means they're free to play with flat color spaces, which they use to indicate like his hoodie and like where his skin is not painted over with the face paint that he's got, like the tips of his dreadlocks and the detail on his jacket. And they use that to create the three-dimensional feeling of the character, just shape and nothing else. And again, abstracted. Boom. Explodes. Reconstitutes himself. Oh, this is so cool. There's not a lot to break down here, really. Like, it really is just they use... Woof. They use the sense of the feelings and the emotions, and again, like those excellent lip flaps. And I love that fucking... Like, look at that. Look how fucking cool that looks. Oh, that's a good motion. He lands, he lectures, he leaves. Zoop. Like, look at that. And also look at how they maintain, like, again, the rhythm of the character. Echo comes on screen, but he never stands still. You can see him, he's bobbing his head, he's swinging around, he's delivering, like, the rhythm of what he's feeling. He's moving his hands, he's twisting, he's turning. He's always in motion. And the hair, again, look how the hair follows him around. So well done. And here, just a tiny little use of speed lines to sell the swiftness of the motion. Like, again, maintaining the rhythm. Look how he begins a motion here in a rhythm, boom, and then he gets here and it's maintained perfectly. It looks like he's still doing a dance to the same beat when he gets there. This is so fucking cool. Like, and again, that little choreography he does, perfectly maintained between each pop, as he pops in and out of existence. You still get the sense that he's completing this motion here, and then going into that motion here, and then into that motion there, and then he twists his weight around from that leg to that leg, which moves him in this direction. So, poof, there goes the pop. And it's so, like, the dynamism of what's going on here is just fucking amazing. Like, this is better than any music video the Gorillaz have ever done, by the way. Like from a technical animation perspective, there's so much more in this than in any of the music videos by the Gorillaz I ever saw. Not that it's a competition, but boy, I could gush about this for another couple of hours, at least, easily. Like, no fucking problem, I could gush about this for another couple of hours. Like, that motion alone! Look at that. Like that twirl, like how the arm here starts, comes up, comes around, and then swings out. Like, and how the jacket falls down off her shoulders when she cancels her momentum out. And like, ugh. And then how she recovers up from that little dip. Like the way her hips move. Like, oh, so good. And then there's this. This is just showing off. Like, this is just the animator showing off. This is a fisheye lens effect, an extreme fisheye lens effect, which means in order to animate this in a way that looks convincing, you have to do extreme distortions of the bodies of the characters. And you have to maintain that properly, correctly, from, like, moment to moment. And again, managing to do that and just being fucking casual about it like that is such a fucking... It's such a fucking flex, like that little motion Yasuo does with his hand here. Look how much distortion has to happen from the size that his hand has here, this tiny little itty bitty thing, to how big and giant it's bigger than practically the whole rest of his body at this point. And you don't notice that size transformation because you completely buy that that's the perspective that you're looking through. So the only two things I really have as criticism of this music video is that Yasuo's character design is uninspired to me. Like, he's got speakers on his shoulders, okay, and he's got a ninja mask, and he's got some headphones and a jacket. I don't know. Like, there's really very little interesting about him. My second criticism is that they said it in Paris at the end. Like, the whole video builds up to Echo going around to the various superstars, gathering them all up, and bringing them all to Paris. Which, of course, makes sense because it was unveiled at the League of Legends World Championship in Paris, and it was a whole, like, the whole thing was they do the performance, and they come to Paris, and they perform at Worlds, and yada, yada, yada. But my trouble with it is that it immediately, like, the whole music video now, right here at the end, is tied to League of Legends World Championship Finals in Paris 2019. Right? So, and that's gonna prevent it from being its own thing. Like, because everyone who sees this music video is gonna go, okay, they're in Paris. Why are they in Paris? Like, nothing else in the music video sets up the idea of them going to Paris or being in Paris or Paris itself being important. In fact, the very first establishing shot of the whole thing establishes very clearly that maybe we're in a cosmopolitan world where national borders don't really exist, like where classical European architecture can exist alongside this Pan-Asian skyscraper thing and American skyscrapers from the 1920s, and then at the end it's like, oh, yeah, by the way, we're also in the real European, we're in Paris. And that's, no, that doesn't work for me. I don't like that True Damage, their first single, is tied so strictly only to the real-life city of Paris and the 2019 World Championships. Like, I think that's a pity, because it dates them. Like, it puts a shelf life on them and says, this is from 2019 World Championship Finals in Paris. It is not from any other time. It's not about any other time. It's a promotional thing for this event, which is a pity. I would have liked this to be a thing that stands completely on its own. Love this detail, though, like the little scribbles across the characters. And that. And the cool-ass, the classic cool-ass. Little flash GIANTS. And then flashing out to True Damage, which of course is the symbol that's been painted on Echo's face this whole time. Which then leaves his face and becomes the actual symbol that we look at. With one little last look at his face. And in motion, this just looks so sick. Like that. That looks really fucking cool. Anyway, this video is 1 hour and 7 minutes, and that's pretty short, because it could have been a lot longer, believe you me. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this, please feel free to hit the like, comment, and subscribe buttons. All of those buttons are very helpful to me because they make the numbers go up, and that means YouTube allows me to stay alive one more day. They don't detonate my collar. If you want to support the channel more directly, Patreon is there for that. I also have some tip jars down in the description where you can say, hey, you have an unhealthy obsession with very small animation details. You should probably get someone to help you with that. Here's $3 to help you make that happen. That, too, is very useful to me. I have a merchandise store also, the link to that in the description if you're interested. What else? Right, if you don't want to support me and this channel directly, I completely get it. Like, there's so many fucking things that cost money these days. Every day there's a new subscription service. But the one thing I will say is that for online content creators, like, even those very small donations, like that $1 a month, or just the $1 one time, can be the same. Like, it means literally in terms of numbers the same as thousands of views on a video. So even if you don't want to support me, if there is a content creator out there whose work you enjoy and who you really want to be able to continue doing what they do, consider supporting them directly. Like, just with whatever you can, anytime that you can. Send them along $1, because it matters so much more than you think, especially with Christmas coming up soon. Like, it's November now, like the middle of November, and Christmas coming up. That's an expensive time, especially for content creators, people who have to travel. So if you have a content creator whose work you enjoy, consider helping them out, even that little bit, because it matters. Anyway, if you haven't enjoyed this video, why did you sit through a full hour of it? But okay, like, yeah, you can hit you can hit the dislike button, and if enough people click the dislike button, well, that ultimately does mean that the countdown around my collar is going to start, and I'm going to have to just rush to make a video in under 24 hours that's going to do at least 100,000 views. Otherwise, well, they release the spinning magnet disc that tracks all the way directly to my neck and cuts my head off. So, you know, please don't, but if you must... Thank you very much for watching.